She never really thought much about how much her hair meant to people. It had always been part of who she was, thick, long, and dark, reaching down her back like a silk curtain. Friends often teased her, calling her the girl with movie star hair. Even strangers sometimes stopped her on the street to ask what she used to make it look so healthy. She would just smile and say nothing special, just patience. But what she didn't know was that her hair, something she had taken for granted all her life, would one day become the reason thousands of people across the country would come together for something beautiful. It all started on an ordinary afternoon. She had gone with her mother to the hospital for a routine checkup. Hospitals always made her feel uneasy. The smell of disinfectant, the beeping machines, and the quiet footsteps in long hallways. She sat in the waiting area, looking at the posters on the walls. One caught her eye. It showed a little girl with no hair smiling brightly. The words under the picture read, "You can help bring back a child's smile, donate your hair." She stared at it for a while. The girl's eyes were full of life even though her head was bare. Something about that image touched her. She didn't say anything, but the thought stayed with her. While her mother was talking to the doctor, she went to get a cup of water from the hallway. That's when she saw her, a small girl sitting on a hospital bed, probably 8 or 9 years old. She had no hair, her scalp smooth and shiny under the white light. She was wearing a yellow scarf around her head and drawing on a piece of paper. The girl looked up for a second and smiled shyly. Her eyes quickly went to the woman's long hair, and for a brief moment there was a soft sparkle in them. It was such a small moment, but something inside her shifted. It wasn't pity, she didn't feel sorry for the girl. It was something different, something deeper. It was the feeling of wanting to give something that truly mattered. That night, as she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, she kept thinking about that little girl. Her reflection looked the same as always, but her mind was somewhere else. She touched the ends of her hair, twisting them around her fingers. She imagined how that girl must feel looking in the mirror every day, wishing to see herself with hair again. She took a deep breath and said softly, "I think it's time." Her mother, sitting on the bed, looked up from her phone. "Time for what?" She smiled gently. "I'm going to cut it, all of it. I want to donate my hair." Her mother blinked in surprise. "Your hair? Are you sure? You've been growing it for years." "I know," she said, still looking at her reflection. "But if it can make someone smile again, then it's worth more on someone else's head than on mine." There was silence for a moment. Then her mother nodded slowly. "If that's what your heart says, then do it. But make sure you're ready." She was ready. The next few days were full of mixed emotions. She kept touching her hair absent-mindedly, realizing she would soon let go of something that had always been part of her. Her friends didn't believe her at first. "You? Cut your hair? No way." One of them laughed, but when they saw the seriousness in her eyes, they stopped laughing. They asked her why she wanted to do it, and she told them about the hospital, the poster, and the little girl with the yellow scarf. There was a soft silence afterward. No one made jokes again. The night before her appointment, she took one last picture with her long hair. Not for social media, but just for herself. She wanted to remember it, not because she was proud of how it looked, but because it had been a part of her journey. She braided it carefully, almost as if saying goodbye to an old friend. The next morning, she woke up early. The sky was cloudy but calm. She wore a simple white shirt and jeans. Her heart raced a little as she walked toward the local salon she had chosen. It wasn't a fancy place, just a small shop with a bright blue door and the smell of shampoo drifting from inside. The woman at the counter smiled and asked, "How can I help you today?" She hesitated for a second, then said, "I'd like to donate my hair." The woman looked surprised. "Oh, really? That's wonderful. But your hair is very long. Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes, I'm sure." A few minutes later, she sat in the chair facing the mirror. The hairdresser tied her hair into several sections with rubber bands. "This way we can keep it neat for the donation," the hairdresser explained kindly. A few people in the salon were watching quietly. One of them whispered, "She's donating it." The word spread softly like a gentle wave. When the scissors touched her hair, she felt her stomach tighten. The sound of the first snip was sharp, almost too loud. It was a strange feeling, like letting go of something precious, but doing it for a reason that made your heart lighter. The hairdresser carefully placed each thick bundle on the counter. When it was over, her shoulders felt bare. She looked into the mirror and almost didn't recognize herself. Her hair now brushed her chin, framing her face. She touched it gently and smiled. It wasn't about beauty anymore. It was about meaning. A woman sitting in the waiting area clapped softly, and soon others joined. The small salon filled with a quiet warmth. Someone took a photo, not for fame, but because the moment felt special. She placed her cut hair inside a clean plastic bag, sealed it carefully, and put it in an envelope with the address of a charity she had found online. The organization made wigs for children who had lost their hair due to illness. She had written a short note to go with it. May this bring back someone's smile. As she left the salon, the cool wind touched the back of her neck. It felt strange but freeing. She looked up at the cloudy sky and whispered a small prayer, not for herself, but for whoever would wear her hair one day. That evening, as she sat at home with her short hair tucked behind her ears, she felt a mix of emotions. There was no regret, only peace. Her phone buzzed. It was the salon owner. Someone from the local paper was here earlier, the woman said. They want to feature your story in tomorrow's edition. I hope you don't mind. I gave them your first name. She was startled. Oh, that's fine, I guess. But it's not a big deal. The woman laughed softly. Maybe not to you, but it might inspire someone else. She didn't think much of it at first. It was just a small act, something from her heart. But the next morning, when she went out to buy groceries, she noticed something strange. The man at the counter smiled at her and said, Hey, you're the girl from the paper, right? That was really kind of you. She blinked, surprised. Oh, you saw that? He nodded. Yeah, my niece had cancer last year. I just wanted to say thank you. People like you make the world softer. His words stayed with her the entire day. Maybe kindness really did spread like light. When she got home, her mother was sitting on the sofa holding the newspaper. On the front page of the local section was a picture of her smiling in the salon chair, her newly cut hair visible. The headline read, Local woman donates hair for cancer patients. She laughed softly, feeling a little embarrassed. Mom, I look so nervous in that photo. Her mother smiled warmly. You look brave. People need stories like this. That night, her social media started buzzing. Friends were sharing the article, tagging her and writing things like, proud of you, and this made my day. Even strangers commented, saying her story inspired them to do something good for others. She didn't feel like a hero or a celebrity. She was just someone who saw something that touched her heart and did what felt right. Lying in bed that night, she thought again about the little girl in the hospital. She wondered where she was, if she was feeling better, if she would one day wear a wig made from her hair. The thought made her smile. Maybe their paths had crossed for a reason. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her life had meaning beyond herself. It wasn't about appearance or beauty or attention. It was about connection. One small act of kindness had already begun to ripple quietly through her world, and even though she didn't know it yet, that simple decision, the moment she said, I think it's time, was the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would reach far beyond her little town. Something that would touch hearts, inspire strangers, and in time, unite a whole nation under one simple truth. A small act of love can change everything. The next few days after the haircut were quiet. She went back to her usual routine, work, errands, family dinners, but something inside her felt lighter. Whenever she passed a mirror, she would pause for a second, still not used to her short hair. At first, it felt strange, like a part of her was missing, but then she would smile, remembering why she did it, and the feeling of peace would come back. Her phone still buzzed with messages from friends and even strangers who had seen the article in the local paper. Some thanked her. Others said they were thinking of doing the same. It felt nice to know that something so small could make people want to be kind. She wasn't looking for attention, but it felt good to see goodness spreading around. A few days later, she went back to the salon just to drop off a thank you note for the hairdresser who helped her. The woman smiled as she walked in. You wouldn't believe how many people have come here asking about hair donations since your story came out, she said. It's like the whole town suddenly wants to help. She was surprised. Really? The woman nodded. At least 10 people in the last 2 days. One of them was a little girl who brought her mom. She said she wanted to donate her ponytail like you. That made her heart swell. She hadn't expected that. That's amazing, she said softly. I just wanted to do something small. The hairdresser smiled. Sometimes small things travel farther than we ever think. Later that week, a message appeared in her inbox from a local radio host. He wanted to invite her to a short interview about her donation and how others could help too. At first she hesitated. She had never spoken on the radio before, and the idea of people listening to her made her nervous. But then she thought about the little girl in the hospital and decided to do it. The studio was small and friendly. The host greeted her with a warm handshake and said, "Don't worry, it's just a chat. People want to hear your story." During the interview, she spoke simply, just from the heart. She told them how one small moment in the hospital changed her perspective, how she realized that something as simple as hair could mean so much to someone who lost theirs. The host listened carefully and said, "That's beautiful. You know, we often underestimate how much impact a small act can have. You've started something wonderful here." The next morning, she was surprised to find dozens of messages on her phone again. People who had heard the interview wrote things like, "Your story made me cry, and I'm gonna cut my hair too." A local teacher said her students wanted to organize a small event at school to collect hair donations for cancer patients. She couldn't believe it. Something she thought was just a quiet, personal act had started spreading like light. A week later, the small newspaper article was shared on a big social media page that focused on positive news. Within hours, the post went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, people from different cities, even other countries, thanking her for her kindness and saying how they were inspired to help others. She was sitting in her kitchen when she saw the post reach over 100,000 shares. Her heart raced. She never expected something like this. Her brother walked by and laughed, saying, "Looks like you've become famous." She smiled shyly. "No, not famous. Just lucky to be part of something good." Soon messages started coming from reporters and TV stations asking if she would share her story on camera. At first, she didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to lights, cameras, or interviews. She just wanted people to know that helping others didn't require money or fame, just heart. She agreed to one interview with a small TV channel that focused on local heroes. The crew came to her house one afternoon. They were kind and respectful, setting up their equipment while chatting warmly with her family. When they asked her to describe what made her decide to donate, she took a moment to think and said quietly, "Sometimes you see something that changes how you look at everything. I saw a little girl in a hospital who had lost her hair, and I couldn't forget her smile. I just wanted to give something that could bring that smile back." The interviewer smiled. "That's beautiful. What do you hope people learn from your story?" She answered simply, "That kindness doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real." When the interview aired that night, something unexpected happened again. Her story was shared across major news outlets and social platforms. People called it the kindness cut, and many began posting pictures of their own hair donations, tagging her name with messages like, "Inspired by her story." One woman from another city wrote, "I lost my sister to cancer. Watching your story made me cry. Thank you for reminding me that there's still so much love in this world." She read that message 3 times. It made her realize how deeply people were connected by compassion, even strangers. Over the next few weeks, her life became busier than she ever imagined. She was invited to schools and small community centers to speak about hair donation and cancer awareness. At first, she didn't know what to say to large groups, but every time she stood in front of people, the same truth came to her heart. "You don't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference," she would say. "Sometimes all it takes is one act of love." In one of those events, a little boy came up to her after she finished speaking. He was around 10 with short hair and a bright smile. He handed her a small envelope. "This is my hair," he said proudly. "I wanted to give it too." She knelt down, holding back tears. "That's so kind of you. You're going to make someone very happy." His mother, standing nearby, said softly, "He saw your story on TV and begged me to let him do it." That night, when she got home, she placed that small envelope next to her own framed newspaper article. It reminded her that kindness keeps multiplying, one heart at a time. As her story spread further, even celebrities began mentioning her name in interviews and encouraging fans to join hair donation drives. Social media was suddenly full of people holding their braids in ponytails with captions like, "For love," "For hope," "For her story." Her inbox flooded with messages, so many that she could barely keep up. But she read every one of them. Some were from cancer survivors thanking her. Others were from parents who said their children now wanted to donate too. Each message touched her deeply. One night, as she sat by her window reading those words, she began to cry quietly, not out of sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. She had never imagined that one small act, born from a simple moment in a hospital hallway, could bring so many people together. Her mother came into the room and saw her wiping her eyes. "Are you okay?" She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I can't believe what this has become." Her mother sat beside her and said gently, "When kindness comes from a true place, it always finds its way. Look at what you've started. You gave something of yourself, and now the whole world is giving too." She leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "I just hope it lasts. I don't want this to be a trend. I want it to be something people keep doing." Her mother smiled. "It will. Because you didn't do it for attention. You did it out of love. And love doesn't fade easily." Over the next month, she continued speaking at small events and helping connect people with donation organizations. Every time she saw someone with a newly cut ponytail, she felt proud, not of herself, but of the shared kindness in people's hearts. Her story even reached a national charity that helped cancer patients. They reached out and asked if she would like to visit their center to see how the wigs were made. She agreed immediately. When she walked into the center for the first time, she was amazed. There were rows of tables, volunteers gently brushing and weaving strands of donated hair, turning them into beautiful wigs. The room was filled with laughter, conversation, and soft music. One of the staff members showed her the process. "Every wig here carries a story," the woman said, "and yours is one that started a movement." Hearing that made her heart swell. As she left the building holding a small thank you card from the charity, she realized something important. This wasn't just about hair anymore. It was about humanity. How one simple act could wake kindness in so many others. Standing outside with the sun setting behind her, she took a deep breath and smiled. She didn't know what the next chapter would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Kindness had a life of its own now. And she was ready to follow wherever it led. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, but the wave her small act created didn't slow down. Everywhere she looked online, there were new pictures, new faces, and new stories. People cutting their hair, smiling proudly, and sending it away in envelopes. It wasn't just in her country anymore. People from other places had joined too. They called it the kindness chain. At first, she couldn't even believe how far things had gone. Her phone never stopped buzzing. People wanted to thank her, to tell her how her story changed something inside them. Some said they had been struggling with sadness or loneliness, but after hearing about her, they felt hopeful again. It amazed her how one small act could light so many hearts. Her story was now everywhere. News anchors talked about her on morning shows. Newspapers printed her photo again, and her interviews were shared thousands of times online. She didn't like the attention much, but she was happy that the real message, helping others, was being heard. Every time someone tagged her with a photo of their cut hair, she felt like she was watching kindness grow in real time. One afternoon, she got a message from a popular TV show that highlighted inspiring people. They wanted to feature her as part of a special segment called The Power of One. She hesitated at first. She didn't want fame or spotlight, but then she thought if more people hear this story, more people might donate too. So she agreed. When the day came, she traveled to the city where the show was filmed. The studio was much bigger than she imagined. Bright lights, cameras everywhere, people with headsets rushing around. She felt nervous sitting in the makeup chair as they prepared her for the interview. Her short hair had grown a little, now brushing her shoulders. She looked at herself in the mirror and whispered quietly, "You're not here for yourself. You're here for them, for all those children who need hope." When the cameras started rolling, the host smiled and asked her about the day she decided to cut her hair. She told the story again, gently and honestly, just as she had before, about the hospital, the little girl, and the feeling she couldn't shake. The host listened with soft eyes and said, "You turned a simple act into a national movement. Did you ever imagine this would happen?" She shook her head. "Not at all. I thought it would be something small. I didn't do it to be seen. I just wanted to help. But maybe that's why it touched people, because it came from a real place." When the episode aired, millions of people watched it. Her phone and inbox flooded again, but this time something different happened. Many organizations reached out. asking if she would like to collaborate with them to start official donation drives. Schools wanted to organize events. Salons across the country wanted to become donation partners. She felt overwhelmed but excited. It was bigger than her now. What started as one haircut had turned into a growing network of people who wanted to make a difference. Soon, a large charity that specialized in supporting children with cancer contacted her. They told her they had seen the impact her story created and wanted to launch a campaign inspired by her journey. They called it Strands of Hope. They asked if she would like to be the face of it. At first, she didn't know what to say. "I'm not a celebrity," she said softly over the phone. The charity representative laughed kindly. "You're something better. You're real. That's what people connect with." So she agreed. Within weeks, posters with her picture and the words "Strands of Hope," "Donate your hair," "Share your heart," appeared across cities. There were donation drives in schools, offices, salons, and even in public parks. People lined up to cut their hair, smiling as they held their braids high. Every time she attended one of these events, she was amazed. The energy, the laughter, the kindness, it was everywhere. At one event, she saw an elderly woman, maybe in her 70s, sitting in a salon chair, ready to cut her long silver hair. When she asked why she wanted to donate, the woman smiled and said, "Because I had cancer once, and someone gave me a wig. Now it's my turn to give back." That moment stayed with her. It reminded her that kindness doesn't have an age, a face, or a limit. It just moves from one heart to another. As the campaign grew, so did her sense of responsibility. She wanted to make sure that every donation truly reached the people who needed it most. She began working closely with the charity, visiting hospitals and meeting families whose children were battling illness. Each visit touched her deeply. During one visit, she met a young girl sitting in bed wearing a soft brown wig. The girl's mother told her that the wig had been made from donated hair, just like hers. When she asked how it felt, the little girl smiled shyly and said, "It feels like hope." Those words made her eyes fill with tears. That night, as she sat in her hotel room, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. She was still the same person who once quietly brushed her hair in her bedroom mirror, but now her life had meaning she had never imagined. People were calling her a hero, but she didn't feel like one. She felt like someone who had been given a small chance to do something good, and took it. But with all the good attention came pressure too. Some people began asking questions online, wondering if her story was being used for publicity or if she was gaining money from it. At first, she ignored those comments, but they started to bother her. She didn't want anyone to think her act of kindness had a selfish motive. One evening, she opened her laptop and decided to write a post herself. "I started this journey with one goal: to make someone smile. I don't want fame, money, or anything else. I just want people to believe that kindness can still change lives. If you have doubts, I understand. But I promise you, every strand of hair donated is helping someone right now. That's all that matters." Her post went viral again, but this time for a different reason. People admired her honesty. Many commented that they believed her even more because she stayed humble. In the months that followed, the Strands of Hope campaign crossed over to neighboring countries. News reports showed lines of people waiting to donate their hair. One clip showed a father cutting his long beard and saying, "If she can do it, why can't I?" She watched that clip with a smile. Kindness was growing like a field of wildflowers, unplanned, unexpected, and beautiful. One day, the charity invited her to a special ceremony. They told her they wanted to celebrate the success of the campaign and show her how far her story had reached. When she arrived, she was shocked to see hundreds of people gathered: families, doctors, volunteers, and donors. Some were holding thank you signs, others carried small boxes filled with envelopes of donated hair. A large banner read, "Because one person cared." When she walked up to the stage, the crowd clapped and cheered. She felt shy but deeply moved. The host handed her a microphone and said, "You started this. Tell us, what does kindness mean to you now?" She looked around the room, her voice soft but steady. "Kindness means remembering that we belong to each other. It's not about how much we give, but about giving from the heart. I didn't plan any of this. I just saw someone in need and wanted to help. But I've learned something. Kindness is like a candle. When you share it, it doesn't go out. It spreads." The crowd stood and clapped for a long time. Some even wiped their tears. After the event ended, a group of children came up to her. They were all wearing wigs made from donated hair. One little boy handed her a small note that said, "Thank you for making us feel special." She folded the note carefully and held it close to her heart. That moment was worth more than any award or recognition. As she walked out of the hall that evening, she saw the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The world looked softer, kinder. She smiled to herself, knowing that something beautiful had started, not because of her, but because of the kindness that lived inside everyone. And while she didn't know what would happen next, one thing was clear: the movement was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever believed in the power of a small, genuine act of love. Months passed, and the movement that began with one simple haircut continued to grow. It had spread across towns, cities, and even countries. Everywhere she went, people recognized her face, not as a celebrity but as someone who had reminded the world what kindness looked like. Sometimes people would stop her on the street to say thank you. Others would share their own stories about how they or their children had donated their hair. She always listened with a warm smile and gentle words. Each story felt like a seed that had grown from one tiny act she had done long ago. But even with all the attention and events, her favorite moments were still the quiet ones, visiting hospitals and spending time with children who had received wigs. It made everything real again. One sunny morning, she went to visit a children's hospital in another city. The charity she worked with had told her that several wigs made from recent donations were being given out that day. When she arrived, the hospital lobby was filled with laughter. Volunteers were setting up mirrors, combs, and chairs for the children. There were balloons tied to the walls and a small sign that said, "A New Smile Day." As she walked inside, a little boy waved at her. "You're the hair lady," he shouted happily. The nurses laughed. She knelt down beside him and said, "I guess I am. But really, you're the brave one." He grinned and touched the wig on his head. "Do you like it?" she asked. He nodded proudly. "I love it. I feel like myself again." That simple sentence made her heart full. The boy's mother stood nearby, wiping her eyes. "You have no idea what this means to us," she said quietly. "He's been through so much, but today he woke up excited for the first time in months." Hearing that made her realize how powerful kindness could be when it reached the right place. It wasn't just about hair. It was about giving people pieces of themselves back. Later that day, the charity organizers gathered everyone together to take a group photo. There were children with new wigs, parents smiling, and volunteers cheering. The moment felt pure and full of love. As the photographer counted down, she looked around and thought, "This is what kindness looks like." When she got back home that night, she sat quietly by her window. The city lights flickered outside, and she held the small thank you card the hospital staff had given her. It said, "You brought back smiles that medicine couldn't." That line stayed in her heart for a long time. She didn't seek awards or recognition, but one day she received a letter that surprised her. It was from the Ministry of Health. They wanted to honor her publicly for her work and contribution to cancer awareness. She showed the letter to her mother, who smiled proudly. "You've done so much, you deserve this," her mother said. She hesitated. "I don't know, Mom. I didn't do all this for awards. I just wanted to help." Her mother placed a gentle hand on hers. "Sometimes recognition helps the message grow. Let people see that good things are still happening in this world." So she agreed to attend the ceremony. When the day came, the hall was filled with people: doctors, volunteers, donors, and families. She wore a simple white dress and stood quietly in the crowd until her name was called. The audience clapped warmly as she walked up to the stage. The host handed her a glass award shaped like a heart and said, "This is for a woman whose kindness touched a nation." She took the microphone, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you, but this isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who chose kindness when they didn't have to. It belongs to the mothers, fathers, and children who remind us every day that hope is stronger than pain. I only cut my hair, but all of you turned it into a movement. Together we made something beautiful." The audience stood and applauded. Some people had tears in their eyes. That night she didn't feel like she had received an award. She felt like she had shared it with everyone who believed in kindness. After the ceremony, she began thinking about the future. The campaign had grown larger than anyone expected, and it needed proper organization. With the help of a few close friends and the charity's guidance, she decided to start a foundation. It would help manage hair donations, support cancer patients, and encourage people to take part in community acts of kindness. She spent months planning everything: meetings, paperwork, and outreach. She was careful to make sure it stayed simple and transparent. The foundation wasn't about money or fame. It was about giving ordinary people a way to do something good. When the foundation finally launched, hundreds of people showed up to its first event. The hall was decorated with banners that read, "Kindness grows here." On one side of the room, volunteers were collecting envelopes filled with hair donations. On the other side, children were writing messages for patients they had never met. She stood quietly in the corner for a moment, watching it all. It felt surreal. A few years ago, she had been just one person with a pair of scissors and a simple thought. Now that thought had turned into a movement with thousands of hands working together. During the event, a little girl came up to her holding a paper heart. "I wrote something for you," the girl said shyly. She took the paper and read the words, "Thank you for teaching us that even small people can do big things." Her eyes welled up with tears. She knelt down and hugged the girl. "No, thank you for reminding me why I started." Over the next several months, the foundation continued to grow. Schools joined the campaign, setting up yearly hair donation drives. Local salons offered free cuts for donors. People from different backgrounds came together for one purpose: to give. Sometimes she would receive letters from people she'd never met. One was from a man who had lost his wife to cancer. He wrote, "I saw your story when I was at my lowest. It reminded me that there's still light in this world. I've started volunteering at a hospital now. Thank you for giving me a reason to smile again." Reading letters like that reminded her that kindness didn't just heal those who received it. It also healed those who gave it. One evening, while sorting through donation envelopes at the foundation office, she found one that stood out. It was from a young woman who had included a note that said, "I lost my hair during treatment 2 years ago. Now it's grown back and I want to give it to someone who needs it, because someone once gave it to me." That note made her pause and take a deep breath. It was proof that kindness had come full circle. Not long after, the foundation organized a national event to celebrate how far the campaign had come. The venue was filled with people: donors, patients, doctors, volunteers, and supporters. There were stories shared on stage, songs performed by children, and even a short video showing the journey from her first haircut to that very day. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the stage slowly, looking at the faces in the crowd. So many of them were smiling, some wearing wigs, others holding their freshly cut hair. She began softly, "When I cut my hair years ago, I never thought it would lead here. I was just one person, and I didn't think one person could do much. But I've learned something important. One act of kindness can start 1,000 more. You don't need to be rich, famous, or powerful to change lives. You just need a heart that's willing." As she spoke, people listened in silence. The only sound in the room was her voice and the occasional sniffle from someone wiping away tears. She ended her speech with words that came straight from her heart. "The hair we cut will grow back, but the kindness we give will stay forever. So keep giving, keep helping, and never stop believing in goodness." The crowd erupted in applause. Some stood up and clapped with all their strength. Cameras flashed, but she barely noticed them. What mattered to her was the feeling in the room, the shared warmth of hundreds of hearts beating together for something good. Later that night, as she walked home under the streetlights, she thought about the journey she had been on. It had been full of surprises, challenges, and emotions. But through it all, one truth had stayed the same. Real change begins when someone chooses to care. She looked up at the stars and whispered to herself, "This is what kindness can do." And deep inside, she knew that this was still only the beginning of something even bigger. Years passed, and the world kept changing, but her message never faded. What began as one small act had turned into something that reached beyond her own city, beyond her own country. People she had never met were now cutting their hair, sharing photos, and writing messages of hope under one shared phrase: kindness grows. Every few days, she would still visit the foundation's small office. It wasn't fancy, just a quiet space with a few desks, boxes filled with donated hair, and photos on the wall of smiling faces. The walls were covered with letters from people all over the world. Some were from parents thanking her for helping their children. Others were from young people who had started their own donation drives after hearing her story. She loved to sit in that room when it was quiet. She would pick a letter at random, read it slowly, and remind herself why she started. No matter how much time had passed, it still filled her heart the same way it did on that very first day. One afternoon, while she was at the office, one of the volunteers walked in holding a big envelope. "This just came in," the volunteer said. "You might want to see it." She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from a school teacher in a small mountain village. The teacher wrote about how her students had been inspired by the story of a woman who donated her hair. They didn't have much, but they wanted to help too, so they decided to grow their hair and donate together. The teacher included photos of the children all smiling, holding their long braids tied neatly with ribbons. As she looked at the photos, tears formed in her eyes. Those children didn't know her personally, yet somehow they had understood everything her heart had tried to say. She whispered softly, "This is what love looks like when it travels." A few weeks later, she decided to visit that village herself. It was far away, and the journey took hours by bus through winding mountain roads. When she arrived, the air was crisp and cool. The teacher and her students were waiting outside the small school building, waving excitedly. The children ran up to her, handing her little cards they had made. Each one said something different. Some wrote, "Thank you." Others drew pictures of hair and hearts. She smiled and hugged them one by one. Inside the classroom, she spoke to the children. She told them about how her small decision years ago had grown into something much bigger than she ever imagined. She told them that kindness doesn't depend on age, money, or fame. It starts with a feeling, a choice. One of the children raised his hand and asked, "Do you ever miss your long hair?" She laughed softly. "Sometimes," she said. "But every time I think about it, I remember that someone else got to smile because of it. That's worth more than any hair I could have." The children clapped, and one girl said, "When I grow up, I want to be kind like you." Those words stayed with her long after she left the village. On the way back home, she sat by the bus window, watching the sunset fall over the hills. She thought about how far everything had come. From a single haircut to an entire generation learning to give, that was something she could never have dreamed of. Months later, she received an invitation to speak at an international event about humanitarian work. It was in another country, a place she had never been before. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't used to traveling abroad or speaking in front of huge audiences, but she remembered what her mother once said, "When kindness has something to say, let it speak." So she agreed. When she arrived at the event, the hall was filled with people from all around the world, activists, doctors, teachers, and leaders. She stood backstage, nervous but calm. She wasn't there as someone famous. She was there as someone who believed that even small acts could change the world. When her turn came, she walked up to the stage. The spotlight felt warm on her face. She looked out at the audience and began to speak, her voice steady and real. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I'm just someone who wanted to do something small. I cut my hair one day because I saw someone who needed it more than I did. That's all. But what I learned from that moment is that kindness grows when we share it. It doesn't need money, power, or fame. It just needs a heart that's willing to care." She told stories about the hospitals, the children, the schools, and the letters she had received. She told them about the mountain village and the kids who donated their hair together. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a moment, and then filled with applause. After the speech, many people came up to her. A woman from another country said she wanted to start a similar foundation. A young man said her story had given him hope after losing his sister to cancer. She listened to them all with gratitude, realizing how wide the circle of kindness had become. When she returned home, she found herself walking through her neighborhood late one evening. The streets were quiet, and the cool breeze brushed against her short hair. She stopped by a small mirror shop and looked at her reflection. She saw someone who had changed, not in fame or status, but in heart. She saw the same person, but with more light inside. Later that night, she sat on her balcony looking at the sky. It was full of stars, scattered across the darkness like tiny sparks of hope. She thought about everything: the first haircut, the first smile, the first thank you letter. She smiled to herself and whispered, "All of this from one simple act." Time went on, and she eventually stepped back from daily foundation work. She wanted younger people to take the lead, to carry the message forward in their own way. She believed that the world always needed new voices of kindness. But even after stepping away from the front, she never stopped caring. Sometimes she would visit quietly during events, standing at the back, watching as others spoke, cut their hair, and shared their stories. She loved seeing that the flame she had lit years ago was still burning, stronger than ever. One day, as she was leaving a foundation event, a teenager stopped her at the gate. "Are you the lady who started this?" he asked. She smiled gently. "I guess I am." He looked shy at first, then said, "My sister lost her hair during treatment. She got one of the wigs your group made. It made her so happy. I just wanted to say thank you." Her eyes softened. "How is she now?" "She's better," he said, smiling. "And she's growing her hair to donate too." That moment touched her deeply. It felt like everything had come full circle again. Like the kindness she once gave had found its way back to her, carried by someone new. That night she sat by her window again, thinking about the long journey she had walked. It hadn't always been easy. There were times when she felt tired, when she doubted whether one person could really make a difference. But every story, every letter, every smiling face had answered that question for her. She realized that making a difference didn't mean changing the whole world. It meant changing one person's world at a time. Before going to bed, she took out an old photo album. Inside was the picture of her first haircut, the day it all began. She looked at it for a long moment. Her younger self looked nervous but hopeful. She whispered softly to that girl in the picture, "You did well. You really did." Years later, when people spoke about her story, they didn't just talk about the hair she donated. They talked about the kindness she inspired. They talked about the lives that were touched, the hearts that were opened, and the hope that spread across borders. In a world that often felt divided, her story had become a gentle reminder that goodness still existed, and that it could start with something as simple as a single act. Even after she was gone, the foundation continued to grow. New volunteers joined, new donors stepped forward, and the message kept spreading. Schools taught her story to remind children that they didn't need to wait to grow up to make a difference. And every time someone cut their hair to help another person smile, they carried a little piece of her spirit with them. Somewhere in a quiet corner of the world, a child might still ask, "Why do people cut their hair and give it away?" And someone would smile and reply, "Because once, a woman did it to help someone else, and she reminded the whole world how powerful kindness can be." And that's how her story lived on. Not in fame, not in statues or awards, but in every act of love that followed. Because kindness, once shared, never truly ends. It just keeps growing, quietly, beautifully, endlessly. Years later, her story had become part of people's memories, yet it never felt old. It still found new ways to reach hearts, sometimes through a small article, sometimes through a quiet conversation between two friends. The foundation she started was now run by a new generation, filled with young volunteers who had grown up hearing about her kindness. They didn't know her personally, but they carried her message like a promise to keep doing good, even when no one was watching. Every wall of the foundation's office was now covered with photos and handwritten letters. Some of them were old, from the early days when she was still there. Others were new, from people across the world who had just learned about the cause. The office had moved to a bigger place now, but the heart of it was still the same. One quiet afternoon, a new volunteer named Adil was sorting through a stack of letters. He was a college student, young and curious, and had joined the foundation because his sister had once received a wig during her cancer treatment. He had heard the founder's name all his life, but had never really known her story beyond the basics. That day, while arranging old files, he found an envelope at the bottom of a drawer. It was yellowed with age, sealed with a faded sticker that read, "Open when it's time." There was no date, no name, just those words. He hesitated for a moment, then took it to the foundation's director. The director, an older woman who had worked with the founder years ago, looked at it closely. "I remember this," she said softly. "She left it here before she retired. She said someone would know when the time was right to open it." They gathered the team together and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in her neat, familiar handwriting. It said, "If you're reading this, it means the world is still in need of kindness. I hope by now you've seen what a small act can grow into. Don't let this mission become about names, awards, or headlines. Keep it human. Keep it simple. Help quietly and let love do the loud part. And if someday you feel lost, just go out and do one kind thing. It will remind you why this all began. The room fell silent. Some people wiped their eyes. The director folded the letter carefully and said, "We'll frame it. It belongs on the wall." They placed it right in the center of the main hallway where everyone could see it every day. The words seemed to breathe life into the space, as if her spirit had returned for a moment to remind everyone what truly mattered. Over the next few months, the foundation started a new project called the Ripple Project. Its goal was to encourage small acts of kindness beyond just hair donation, helping neighbors, visiting hospitals, supporting families, and simply being there for one another. They wanted to carry her legacy forward, not only through what she did, but through what she stood for. To launch it, they organized a gathering at the same hospital where she had once visited children years ago. The hall looked brighter than ever, filled with photos, lights, and laughter. Among the guests were old volunteers, new members, and families who had been touched by her work. Adil was asked to speak that day. Standing at the podium, he looked nervous but inspired. He held the letter she had written and said, "I never met her, but I feel like I know her through what she left behind. She taught the world that kindness doesn't need a reason, it just needs a heart." And that message is still alive today, in this room, in all of us. The crowd clapped softly, not out of excitement, but out of pure emotion. It was the kind of moment that made people believe that goodness truly never disappears. It just changes hands. After the event, Adil walked to the children's ward to deliver some gift boxes the foundation had prepared. As he entered one of the rooms, he saw a little girl sitting on the bed, playing with her new wig. She looked up and smiled shyly. "Are you from the kindness group?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, I am." She looked at her reflection in a small mirror and said, "I feel pretty again." Adil smiled. "You are pretty. Always were." As he left the room, he thought about how she must have felt, and he understood for the first time what the founder must have felt that day she met her first wig recipient. It wasn't about pity or charity. It was about giving back a piece of confidence, a piece of hope. Later that evening, the foundation team decided to visit the founder's resting place. It had been many years, but people still left flowers there. Some even left small locks of hair tied with ribbons, a quiet tradition that had started on its own. They brought fresh flowers and placed them beside her name. For a while, no one spoke. The evening air was cool, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. Finally, the director said softly, "She'd be so proud of what this has become." Adil added, "She probably wouldn't believe how far her kindness has gone." The director smiled faintly. "She would. She always believed kindness could reach anywhere." They stood in silence a bit longer, then turned to leave. As they walked away, the director looked back one more time and whispered, "We'll keep it growing." In the following years, the Ripple Project spread quickly. It wasn't just about donating hair anymore. It was about doing whatever one could to make life a little brighter for someone else. People began sharing their stories online, feeding stray animals, helping elderly neighbors, paying for someone's meal, or writing kind letters to strangers. Each act became part of something bigger, a living chain of kindness that seemed unstoppable. And everywhere it spread, people mentioned her name with quiet respect, not as a hero, but as someone who had shown them what was possible when you cared. One year, on the anniversary of her first donation, the foundation held a special event called the Day of Giving Back. They invited people from all walks of life to come together and do something kind for their community.